Thank you for listening into the CareerJitsu podcast this week. Frank and I are so excited because we have somebody who has a profession that is very similar to Frank's in education. He is a vice principal, so we are excited to have a chance to talk to somebody who's a vice principal because Frank will definitely have a lot of relations and correlations that he can make as well because he has a profession in education as well. So Mike O'Brien is a vice principal. He works in a school district that is actually the second, he told me, the second ranked lowest socioeconomic status in the state of New Jersey, which is impressive because if you're working with those kids, there's a lot of challenges that come with it. So he's going to talk about a lot of challenges that and how he handles them and how the art of jujitsu has helped him in handling those challenges because that's what our podcast is about. Mike is a blue belt in BJJ, and he has been training at Momentum BJJ in Nutley, New Jersey. And he's going to be able to connect his training, his experience training. He told me that his kids, I believe, are involved in the school as well.
Yeah, both
So
boys do
he's
jujitsu.
so he's very ingrained in that school, and he's going to talk a lot about the benefits that he has achieved through jujitsu and how he has applied them into his job as a vice principal of a high school. Thanks. Welcome to the podcast, Mike.
Thank you for having me.
Mike, I am personally invested in this interview so much because we're both doing the same thing. We're both trying to help as many students as we can. We're in different positions, of course, and in different socioeconomic strata, but we're going to have a lot of things to share. I can tell you for a fact, and I can tell my listeners for a fact, being in BJJ has helped me be a better, more compassionate, more patient teacher for my students, and I can't wait to hear about your experience. So let's get started first with your experience in jujitsu. When did you start? Why did you start? What was it like? And how's it going for you?
So I first started in my mid to late 20s. I just dabbled really in Hoboken, New Jersey. There was a small jiu-jitsu gym there when I first moved here to New Jersey from Pennsylvania. And it's something that I've always been interested in because, growing up watching the UFC, seeing how incredible that sport is. And I'm the kind of guy that I don't like just being a fan. I like actually participating in things. And so I tried it out for a little bit. But at that time, I was also in graduate school for educational leadership. And my wife and I were starting to plan our family. And I was moving into positions of leadership professionally as well. So that was a little short lived. And I consider my actual real jujitsu training started in 2018 at Momentum when we moved to Nutley. And I remember this very clearly. I was driving down Franklin Avenue, which is the main street of Nutley, and I saw Momentum, and the windows were completely fogged up with steam just from the work that was going on in there. And I saw a guy jump out of his car and run into the start going training, and I was like, I need to go there. Like that's the spot. And my first introduction to the head instructor, Julio, I knew was the place for me because it was just an incredible welcoming atmosphere, great support system. When you step on that mat, you're Momentum. You're in a home when you step on foot on that mat. And that's all because of course, we're going to talk about leadership, the leadership of our instructor. And everybody in there is there just to help make each other better people and we form great friendships with each other, great training partners. And every day we're there pushing each other to get better. And, when someone's feeling down, we're picking them up. And the unique thing about jujitsu is that we pick each other up by beating each other up a little bit, you know?
That's true.
It's a funny sport when when someone chokes you out, you're like, oh, that was great. But that's also one of the great things about jujitsu is the trust that you form with each other because you're literally putting your physical well-being in the hands of somebody else. And without that trust and the sport can't happen. And it forms great relationships.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So what was your first experience like? Was it difficult? Were you comfortable there immediately? Were you surprised at what you encountered?
So I was very comfortable with the people there at first. The first individual that I actually drilled with and sparred with, this guy, Vinny, who's now a very good friend to this day. It was hard. When I got out there, it was one of those things where it's like, oh, that was just a warm up. I'm exhausted. I'm shot. And then when we were doing some situational, sparring, we were doing some situational things from side control. And I remember that I had this woman, Lisa, had me in side control. And it was funny. I'm, brand new, so I'm being a little spazzy. And she's like, "Come on, you can't get out of this," you know. And I'm like, "Oh my god, this is like the craziest thing," because she had so much control over me and was probably putting in minimal effort at that, you know. And it's humbling. You know, you go in there, and I've been an athlete my entire life, and you think you're going to go in there and you're going to pick it up, and that is not what jujitsu is. You know, it is a very humbling experience, and the only way to learn and to progress is to do it. You know, you always hear these stories of people saying, like, "Oh, I'll start when I get in shape." You just got to go. You just got to get in there. You got to do it. Jujitsu will get you in shape. You know, the only thing that gets you in jujitsu shape is jujitsu. So the first day was definitely very humbling, but at the same time, I absolutely loved it and have been there ever since.
So before we get into your career, I have a question. Do your students know that you have a blue belt in jiu-jitsu?
They do. They do. They know that I train, which is a lot of fun because with kids and they're very involved and interested in like the UFC because it might be because of a video game or just their general interest in it. And the sport of jiu-jitsu is becoming so popular that there are jiu-jitsu gyms everywhere. And I do have to brag about the state of New Jersey for a moment because New Jersey as a grappling state has got to be one of the best out there because the wrestlers that we have that come out of New Jersey, if you look at the top jiu-jitsu players that are out in the world, so many are from New Jersey. So many of the kids that are in high school are exposed to grappling or exposed to wrestling because their classmates have gone to states, they've gone to nationals. When you're in New Jersey, you go to high school, wrestling is very prominent, you know, and I think because of that, you know, that grappling art now has trickled into jujitsu, and both of them are very complementary of each other. For example, at our jujitsu gym, a lot of the kids that train are also in our rec wrestling program as well. Our head
So
instructor
you
is one of the
roll, so you
coaches.
get to roll with some of your kids.
Well, not my current students. However, funny story, one of my former students at a high school that I was at when I first came to New Jersey, I went on the match and he showed up and looked at me. He's like, "Mr. O'Brien?" I was like, "Tommy?" He's like, "Yeah." He's like, "I went to, you know, the high school with you and I was one of your students." And I was like, "Oh my God, I remember you." You know, funny enough, I actually helped him get his substitute teaching certification because he was exploring education himself. And we got our blue belts together, which is a really, really special experience to have done that with a former student. And he's a much larger guy than I am. He's like about 250, maybe 270. And one day we were rolling with each other and I popped some floating ribs, just moved the wrong way. And you know how it happens. And I looked at him, I go, "Did I give you detention when you were one of my kids? Is that why you did that?" You know, just a little bit of a joke. And, you know, we got a kick out of it. And it's amazing that jujitsu brought us together. And not only just on the mats, but like I just mentioned before, off of the mats. You know, I helped him get his teaching certificate or substitute teaching certification. And he was a substitute teacher at the current school that I'm at right now. I brought him in and he actually substitute taught a bunch of classes.
That, man, that's just such a good example of the community that you're talking about. I just love that. I love that. So your kids know it is, in my experience, you're right about the UFC because my kids, my students, they know I do it. And I definitely I don't brag about it, but I tell them, look, I'm an old man. I do the best I can. I never like tell them I go in there and I'm some kind of a beast, but they do respect it. They definitely respect it, and then they do like to talk about, what do you think about Khabib, or what do you think about, the fight on tonight? Are you going to watch it? And who do you think is going to win? And could you get out of a? They love to give you those hypotheticals. Could If I got you in
Absolutely.
a rear naked choke, could you get out of it? Could you beat up somebody who's 200 pounds? Do you think you could take down a football? Like they love to give you these cute, silly questions that are,
Oh, yeah.
but it's a nice connection. It's a nice way to connect with something that they see value in. And I do think they give you a little extra respect for it. And that little bit of respect and that bond you make with them, it's worth $1 million.
And you're absolutely right because you know it forms that relationship with the student. And as a vice principal, you know, one of my main jobs is discipline. So when I have connections and relationships with students, and we enter into a contentious situation, having that relationship really helps. You know, things that maybe would have escalated into a more dramatic situation don't, because I can just look at the student and say, "Hey, come on now. Just take a deep breath, go to my office." Just like that. It's really easy because we've laid that groundwork and we have that connection with each other. And but when they know of us educators as also humans that do other things outside of the school, you know, it makes them realize that, okay, you know, this person gets it. He'll listen to me. He's into other things other than just telling me ask me where my hall pass is.
I think you hit that right on the head when you talked about when they realize you're a human being. And this doesn't for anybody who's in education, you don't have to do jujitsu to have that. You can have any hobby,
Absolutely, yeah.
right? And it's really a universal thing. But the fact that a kid thinks that you like them, you appreciate them, and you're like in their corner. Like you're like, hey, you're in their corner in life is a boxing ring and you're one of their people in their corner. So when they understand that and they're getting into an altercation and you can say, hey, let's just chill, man. They don't look at you like some authoritarian figure who just wants to get they look at you as Mr. O'Brien, like the person I know, like we just talked about the UFC yesterday. That that should be taught in every education, in every educational leadership class, making that kind of connection so that you're a human being to them. And
Yeah.
when they look at you, they see another person that they actually enjoy talking to.
I'd say the benefit of that connection too is that they know, one, that you care about them and that you are generally interested in them. And it's nice for the kids to be generally interested in you as well. But when you're in a disciplined situation, and they're teenagers, all teenagers are going to make mistakes. I don't care who you are, it's going to happen. Instead of like coming down on the kid, I can look at them and say, "Hey, I'm just generally disappointed here." And that has a much more profound impact than the old school wagging the finger, raising your voice, yelling. Because you want to instill in them the values that they want to, one, care about themselves. So when you tell a kid that you're disappointed in them because you had that relationship is much more effective again than wagging the finger or yelling at them, because it shows that you care about them. It shows that you're generally interested, that you're not just putting forth some kind of discipline. It's no, I'm trying to create character in you. And this is this moment where there's going to be a consequence, but we're going to use this as a learning, teachable moment as well. Because I'm the kind of vice principal where, yes, of course, there's going to be a consequence, but we always have the follow up conversation of, what could you do better? What can you do different? What did we take away from this? How are we gonna correct this? And if they don't know, well, then that's my job to guide them, because that back end of it, guiding the student, following up with them, staying with them is almost sometimes more important than the consequence that you give. Actually, I would say it is more important than the consequence.
It's the learning moment. It's the moment that they actually learn. And you really like we're riding the same wavelength when you say this. My version of what you do, very similar. I always look at them and I say, I know you and you are better than this. I know you're
Hmm.
better than this. And that's like not disparaging. It's like I'm telling them you're up here. You're not down here. Come on. I know you. You are better than this. Let's talk about it. And when you say that, they're like, yeah, I really am better than this. And it does help. It's that release valve, right?
And what's interesting too, when you have those moments, like to your point with that, when you bring a kid into your office, a lot of the times the body language says a lot. Their head will be down, they'll be staring at the ground. But when you approach it from the point of view of, I know you're better than this, you literally will see them physically pick their head up and start making eye contact.
Yes.
That their confidence comes back up. And it's not this punitive pushing you down. It's like, no, I'm lifting you up. Maybe I'm lifting you up through
Right.
consequence, through punishment, yes, but I'm raising you up to a higher level. And that actually happened today. Funny enough, I had a young man in my office that I'm working with very closely, and I had a conversation just like that. I said to him, I said, listen, I need to explain to you why I'm doing these things. 'Cause I don't think you really get that. Maybe I wasn't clear enough. I'm doing these things with you, and I have this plan for you because I care about you, because I know that there's so much in you and so much potential that if you head down the path that you want to, you're going to waste all of that. And I said, and you're too good of a kid to throw that all away. So I'm going to force you. If you're not going to do it, I'm going to force you on the right path because I believe in you and I want to see you be successful. And this kid, I tell you what, it's the first time I actually saw him smile in months. Probably his eyes lit up, and it was a really cool moment. It was really great. And now when we have another encounter, and we might, I can bring that the conversation back up again and be like, hey, do you remember what we talked about? And then that light bulb will hopefully go off and be like, okay, yeah, Mr. O'Brien, I see what you're saying. I'm going to listen to you and what have you. And again, it goes back to building those relationships and showing kids that you legitimately, genuinely care.
And they can sniff it out and they know when you really do.
Yeah,
And in your situation where, you're at the second lowest socioeconomic status, those kids, and I'm sure you share this philosophy, it's never a bad kid. It's a kid in bad situation, a kid who's in a disadvantaged situation. Kids are too young to be bad. They're too young,
absolutely.
right? it's because they come home and maybe their parents are alcoholics, or maybe there's no parents at home at all, or maybe they slept in their friend's car. And really they go to algebra, and x squared just isn't on their list of priorities at that moment. So when you understand that, and you kids almost did you notice that kids almost always, if you say, is it really the formula you were learning? Is it really the teacher, or is something just not right today? Are you not feeling good? They almost always open up and say, well, I slept in my car last night because I got kicked out of my house, or
Mhm.
whatever it might be. Have you noticed that they just open up and then you have a bond?
Absolutely, because these kids, they want you to ask. It's just that they don't know how to ask for help themselves. Because to your point, they're kids. They're learning how to do this life thing. And us as educators, we're there to guide them. And especially with the students in our demographic, they have many, many challenges. They might have had a rough night and they might have blown up at a teacher, that might blow up at me. And, there's of course a consequence for that because you can't be doing that. But at the same time, I'm always like, what is going on with you today? Just this week I had that with a student that I've been working with for 4 years who has made great strides and great success, just had a bad day. And I was like, hey, I was like, what's going on? Sometimes the tears start flowing. And that's how you know you open that you got something. And with that, I have to say, like, it's not just me in that situation. I have an excellent group of school counselors that I bring in because my whole philosophy of being a vice principal is that I have to treat the student as a whole. There's the social emotional side that I absolutely need to attend to, but then there also, of course, is the disciplinary side as well, right? So when a student does something, they're making a mistake. They're kids. They're all going to make mistakes. You know, we have to correct that and have to be aware of it. But at the same time, if there's something deeper behind that, we need to understand what that is. And that's when I will bring a counselor into my office. And I'm very careful when I do that because I tell the students, I say, listen, they're not here for discipline. At this moment right now, we're switching gears. We're out of the consequence mode. Right now, we care about you when we want to know what's going on. So whatever you say from here on out, this is seriously just a conversation for us to learn about what is going on with you and for us to help you. And these kids open up the world to us.
Mm.
And we've been able to make a really profound impact on a lot of these kids' lives. And even working with their families too. Like I have to say, I have met some seriously outstanding parents in my career. And this year, just currently, I was speaking to a couple parents today who are a pleasure to speak to and work with because we're a team. I know being an effective educator, especially an educational leader, you have to form relationships with the home. You have to.
Mhm.
Because when you have that positive relationship with a parent and you are a team, the success opportunity for that student increases dramatically. And it's great too, because when the student knows, hey, I'm going to call home, they're like, oh no, because they know that that parent is not going to get them out of trouble. They're probably going to double down. And it's a great opportunity for us to, again, form that relationship and understand that no, this is not just me being Mr. Vice Principal. This is us being a community of people who care about each other
Mm,
and work
mhm.
together and grow together.
I love your philosophy, and it's the same thing, same philosophy you just said about your jujitsu. You love that you have a community, because a community is what makes every single member stronger, and you carry that philosophy over to your school. And one of the things I always tell my students is, this is not table tennis. This is not an arm wrestle. It's not me versus you. I'm not up here looking down at you. I'm not trying to control anything. I am trying to be pushing you up from underneath so that you can get on higher ground and get to where you want to go. I'm like your cheerleader. I'm not your boss. I mean, obviously, I have the final say, but that's not why I'm here. I am here as your teammate. You
Yes.
don't cheat. You don't cheat on my tests because I'm the guy. You're going to use my phone number for when you go to apply for a job and you need a reference. You're going to use me. I'm the guy who's going to sing your praises. When you need a college recommendation, you're going to ask Mr. D'Amelio, and I'm going to write one like as if you were my own child. And so when you're having a bad day, you're going to ask me, and I'm going to give you damn good advice. So don't cheat on my test. I'm your coach. You're the one in life fighting. I'm pouring the water on your head. I'm giving you the sponge. I'm telling you to jab cross. Like, we're a team. You have to look at me as your teammate. And I think once they believe that you're their teammate, all the other stuff almost always disappears.
Yes. Yeah. And, in teaching these lessons, just like in jujitsu, right? Jujitsu can be very painful at times and extremely uncomfortable. And sometimes when you're dealing with students and you're working with them, and I let them know, like, this is going to be uncomfortable. There's going to be a consequence. It's not going to be fun. It's not going to be good, but this is going to be good for you and you're going to grow for it because when you persevere through pain, you grow. And when you put forth a consequence, I think it's very important always to explain to a student why you're doing what you're doing so they understand that, yes, this might be painful. This might be uncomfortable. You might be mad at me right now. You're not wanting to even look at me for the next week because what's happening, but it's for your benefit. And at the end of it, when you realize what has happened, it's going to be like, okay, yeah, Mr. O'Brien was right, and you grew as a person. And jujitsu is a lot like that too. When you're in there, if somebody were to come in and watch, they'd be like, you guys are crazy. That someone doesn't know jujitsu. It's like, you guys are really beating on each other. But it's like, no, we have incredible respect for each other. Some of us are great friends, but you know, you grow through that. It's like when when you make steel, it's a violent process sometimes. You got to hammer that out, but the end product is going to be something very, very strong. And, that's how we work with our students. We are forging them into becoming very, hopefully, successful, productive young men and women in the society. And at times, that process is a struggle. And that's okay because that develops character, just like in jujitsu. When you struggle and you persevere through that, it develops character. Outside of that, problems in your life and things that you might be going through, you can breathe through it. Because if you can breathe through a 275 pound guy on top of you trying to choke you out, and you're sitting there with a calm face just like I am right now, you can handle a lot.
Absolutely, it totally translates over. Man, you have a really sound philosophy for dealing and, you know, we were talking in our pre-interview about the difference, my socioeconomic status of where I teach is middle class, middle level. We have, a bell curve, right? And so it's a little bit easier because the kids don't have, it's not like they're hyper rich and they have those wealth problems and most of the kids are, they have a place to live and food to eat and the basic necessities. So it's a little bit easier. I have a lot of respect for you because you're dealing with kids who just don't have access. Like a bigger portion of your kids in your school don't have access to the basic things that they need to be physically and emotionally safe, right? And that's where behavior problems come from.
Absolutely.
So your job, we were talking earlier, your job and your teachers' jobs, the teachers that you support, sometimes have to put the kids' social needs, mental health, social needs in front of the financial formula, the English poem, the things that are very important. But sometimes you have to reprioritize. Tell us about that balance.
Yeah. So, when entering into a position, of education and leadership, on the outside, you think it's all about curriculum and teacher evaluations and budgets. But the most important thing that we do is support the needs of these kids. And our students where I work, they know that there's somebody for everybody, whether it's me or the phenomenal teachers that we have in my building. I see them staying after school. You walk around my school. First of all, my school is a special place for these kids. When the bell rings, it's still packed. That building is alive.
Wow.
That building is alive 24/7. I actually have to ask kids to leave. I'm like, guys, if you're just gonna be hanging out, go hang outside. We can't be hanging out in the school after hours. They don't want to leave. And we have amazing clubs and activities for these kids. And for a lot of these kids, those clubs and activities and those after school programs, that after school meetup that they're going to have with the teacher, maybe for extra help, is way more important to them than
Hmm.
sometimes the academics that they went through for that day. Because they were able to sit down with that teacher and just talk about life. Teacher and our teachers, they listen. And because if you work in my school, you have to legitimately care about kids and want to dedicate your life to them. And I have to say that we have a very strong staff that does do that. And as the vice principal, there are many times where there's times literally where there's a student where we might butt heads and it's not going anywhere good. It's just not happening. And to make a jujitsu correlation, you got to tap out. You got to know when to tap. And that's when I will then go to a teacher who I know they have a very good relationship with and say, hey, listen, I had a really rough conversation with a situation with, this student today. I know that you guys are really tight. Here's what happened. Can you check in with them at some point today to make sure they're okay and see what's going on? And they do. Oh, and it's awesome. Our coaches and our athletic programs, I'm constantly talking to them because they're trying to get these kids involved in the school because otherwise you might be on the street up to some nonsense. And that's not healthy. So we have so many. If you think about a club, we have it. And if we don't have the club, we'll make it for you
Well,
because we
let me
want a
ask
kid
you,
kids
let,
there.
let me cut you off and ask you this question. Do you have a jujitsu club?
We don't have a jiu-jitsu club. That's something that would be amazing. We do have a very strong wrestling program, but we actually partnered with a neighboring school district just to increase our numbers. And we had an incredible year this year. One of our female wrestlers made it all the way to states, her first time ever. And we're so proud of her. She did an amazing job. And with our wrestling program, I'll talk about New Jersey wrestling. One of my former students, she was a two-time back-to-back state champ. And because of her success, the amount of girls now that are wrestling in our program has increased a lot. And it's really spreading the sport out in such an amazing way. And it's so good to see. So hypothetically, if we ever were able to make a jiu-jitsu club, man, it'd be packed. It would be packed.
That is something I think Jason, the name escapes me, but Jason and I had a conversation with somebody who does that. He brings jujitsu to his high school, and he says it's just amazing. And I don't think we tried to do it at my high school. The problem is space, and the wrestlers need all those mats. We
Mm.
could not get the gym space for it, but we got the administration approval. We got the kids that were interested. We just didn't have the space to do it. But I do think that would be a great club for you to offer to your kids, especially since you said your kids love to stay after and do clubs.
Hmm.
That obviously wrestling is just as dangerous, if not more dangerous than jujitsu. Jujitsu is definitely
Absolutely.
a gentler art. Obviously, jujitsu sounds scarier because you can choke somebody out, you can break their arm, you could rip their knee with a heel hook, but the way that you teach it, nobody's going to be doing that. Wrestling, you basically pick people up and slam them on the mats. That is definitely a more violent sport. And by the way, I'm not downing. Wrestling is awesome, and I think it should be in schools. And I'm sure they teach it to do it safely. I'm basically making the argument that it would be hard to say we can't approve jujitsu, but we can approve wrestling.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that because you're right. It's the way that you would teach it and the ways that you coach it. Because wrestling as a grappling art is incredibly violent. You look at it. My youngest son just started wrestling, and my wife, when she went there, I told her, I was like, buckle up. It's going to be quite the show when you see this. These little guys are throwing each other around, but they bounce back. And again, the coaching. Luckily, my son has phenomenal coaches here in Nutley. And when you have the right coaches, you do it right. It's incredibly safe, and it's a blast.
Yeah, yeah, definitely it's a blast. So, hey, something to think about. I hope you're able to do it. And I think you kind of sparked my interest in trying to get it going again in my school. If we could find the space to do it, it would just be great for. Also, I think it's good for kids. Like the kids who go into wrestling a lot of times are physical kids. They're like,
Hmm.
you know,
Hmm.
they're kids who are the physical attributes, right? Strong physical attributes. I think jujitsu is a little more open to, so you don't have big biceps. It doesn't really matter. You can still use all of our techniques, right?
Right. Yeah, that's the beautiful thing about jujitsu is literally anybody can do it. And when you train long enough and effectively, anybody can execute these moves in the correct way. We have at our gym, we have people from all walks of life that if you walked out and you saw some of these people, you'd be like, he does jujitsu? I'm like, not only does he do jujitsu, but he's a beast out there.
Yes,
You know,
there's a
like,
lot of that. There's a lot like
yeah,
him, really? Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
that definitely does happen. And the other nice thing about it for kids is you're really not going to see a kid who trains jujitsu start a fight with anybody. They're just going to defend themselves if they need it.
Yeah.
It doesn't promote that. Go ahead, you go.
No, I'm sorry. You see that with the wrestlers, and one of the best part is, when we have, and again, the kids that we have are legitimately, tough kids. And when you know what you're doing, you don't have anything to prove to anybody. When you are training in jujitsu or say even like any kind of like combat sport, if you will, and wrestling, I'll put under that umbrella. It gives you incredible confidence, and it gives you the confidence to walk away from situations, which I think is profoundly important. Because sometimes, and again, with teenagers, their ego gets in the way. They puff up their chests. Might be some people around that want to prove themselves. But if they trained in jujitsu and, you're a wrestler or something, you have nothing to prove to anybody. And you actually are
Correct.
confident enough, but you're also confident enough in yourself to walk away and not care what somebody says about you, because you're smart enough to be like, you know what? This isn't for me. This is not how I want to handle problems, you know, which is really great.
And also, you can walk away or you can have a conversation and not cower, and people feel that, right?
Yes.
If a
Yes.
kid's like, listen, this is not worth it, and they look you right in the eyes and you can just see there's no fear there. They're just telling you this is not worth it. That is sometimes just enough for them. Just that you didn't like, oh, I'm sorry, and that you actually stood your ground and said, look, you don't want this. I don't want this. It's not worth it. I think the attitude that you have, the confidence it gives you, also can help people get into an altercation. But I wanted to touch on something you said. You said you were trained in verbal and physical de-escalation. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. So there's two systems that I'm actually trained in. One's crisis CPI, crisis prevention intervention, and the other one, which I personally like, is called Handle with Care. And what that does is it teaches you verbal de-escalation strategies when you're dealing with students. Just anybody, even police officers should and maybe even be trained in these things too, because verbal de-escalation is your first step. You never want anything to turn into a physical situation. And if you have effective verbal techniques to talk a kid down emotionally, to get them to a place where they can feel safe and they can relax, that's step one. Unfortunately, yes, there are times, and this is every school in America, where physical things might happen. And the Handle with Care system teaches you how to control an out of control body in a very safe manner, where first and foremost, the child will never be injured. And also the staff member or myself included will not be injured as well. So that way the situation can be ended quickly, peacefully, safely. And then you can then start your verbal de-escalation strategies. And it's super effective. The only issue with it is just like jujitsu, if you don't train it, it doesn't become second nature to you. So jujitsu for me really helps that part of my job. And it's not often, but I'm very comfortable in high stress, intense situations where things may or may not get physical. I'm fine in that. And in applying these techniques when, and unfortunately in my 21 career have had to do so, I've been able to do so incredibly effectively and safely. And it's really important to have that training because, as educators, you see somebody doing something, you're going to want to stop them from hurting themselves. We're always worried about the child. But to have the confidence and the ability to go in there and to do it in a way that is quick, effective, is really important. And it's a skill that I possess that I'm very proud of, and has been very effective throughout my entire career.
So have you had to use your BJJ to help break up a fight before?
Yes. Yeah. Now I'm not using the submissions, if you
Of
will. Obviously,
course, I don't.
yeah,
I wasn't.
yeah,
I wasn't
yeah,
envisioning you on the floor with the arm between your legs and being like,
yeah.
"All right, now we're gonna snap this, and you're not gonna fight it." No, but tell us a little bit about like what techniques you used or what situations
Sure.
you might have faced and how you used it.
So and I'll use the Handle of Care specifically because that is a certification that is given to educators in New Jersey. So say, for example, there's an altercation and jujitsu is what it is because of this. Most go to the ground. What you would do is you would come from the back, you would get overhooks from the back to pin their arms back, and then you would take your hands and push them on their back to kind of have them like in this kind of position. And then just like in BJJ, you get hooks in around their legs. So now you're controlling their body so they can't hurt themselves, they can't hurt you, and you can't hurt them. And then, according to Handle of Care, what you do is, and this is really, really important because this child in this hypothetical situation would be a little bit out of control, a lot of adrenaline, that switch flips. They're not necessarily going to be hearing
Hmm.
things. There's a lot going on. So you need to de-escalate very quickly. So the person that is applying the physical de-escalation technique has to remain quiet. And then ideally you have a second person that's also certified in this that will then talk to that child, that will then talk to them and use the verbal de-escalation strategies to get them to calm themselves. And then you release those holds and you then continue on with resolving the situation.
So just review that. So you get overhooks from behind or from in front of them.
Yeah, it's almost like taking the back, but instead of a
Oh,
seatbelt grip,
okay, not the
yeah,
seatbelt. Okay, got you.
yeah,
I got
not a
you.
seatbelt grip because that would be, you don't want to do that. So you go over their arms, so you swim behind their arms, and then you have in the back, so that the kid is kind of like this in this
And
position.
then you,
So they,
and then you, yep, and then you grapevine.
yep, with your legs, yep, you go right over
Okay,
top of theirs, and so that way they're in a
interesting.
position where they physically can't do any harm to themselves or other people. And it's effective. It's worked. And again, in my 21-year career, I have been in those situations, and they have ended very well. from a safety perspective, of course, and it's incredibly effective.
What do you think about policies? Some schools have policies where they say if two kids are fighting and you're not certified, you can't do anything. Let them fight and call your certified people in your building and wait for them to come up. What's your opinion? I do have an opinion on that. I just want to hear what yours is. Two kids are fighting and you're like, okay, let me call my emergency response team 8995, and they might be on the first floor. I'm on the third floor.
Mhm.
Just gonna wait and let you guys duke it out and try to say, "Hey, stop! Hey, come on now!" Like, what's your opinion on that
So
policy?
the first way I would have to answer that is if that's the policy in your school, go by it. Don't ever do something that's against policy. However, I don't think that's really a good, effective policy at all. Now, you can't expect a teacher to jump into a physical altercation and put themselves in harm's way. If are not comfortable doing so and they don't want to do so because they're afraid of getting hurt, or say if a female teacher may be pregnant, of course, you don't want them ever to put themselves in danger. However, in New Jersey, we have laws that will protect teachers if they're trying to break up a fight and something unfortunately happens, and an injury occurs. They're completely 100% protected because in our state, as long as you are attempting to stop a child from hurting themselves or somebody else, you're 100% in the right. So even if you can't completely break it up, for example, I've been in a situation where I was at the opposite end of the building and an altercation took place and I got called in the radio and the teachers were at the time trying to break it up, doing their best, and then I get there and literally in seconds it's over and done with. Because again, I'm trained, it's a different situation. But those teachers, one, I have to commend any teacher that puts themselves in harm's way because they're putting themselves second and the student first physically. We all have families to go home to. And when a teacher puts themselves in harm's way to protect the child, I mean, that's just special. And I think that there are more teachers that would do that than not out there because that's why we're in this profession. We care about the kids at times to a fault, more about them than ourselves. So I think it's important because especially from a physical thing, right? When you're dealing with little guys, maybe a little different. But in high school, they're built out of concrete, metal lockers. The last thing you want is to have a serious injury occur because of a policy.
Right, right. I would tend to agree with you on that. I think here in Massachusetts, I don't know. I feel like the policy is very blurry and it seems to be very much like, now we don't have a lot of fights in our school, so I don't have this problem, but a lot of times we'll get communication that you got to call the response team, do not do anything. I just feel like if I saw a kid on the ground getting ground and pounded with elbows into their face or getting choked, if a kid is getting choked in a headlock, and I just can't see a teacher saying, I hope the response team gets here before you die. I just don't see that. I see, like, I don't say you wouldn't kick the other kid in the head, but you would try to get him off, peacefully
Hmm.
get him off the other person. So I think
Exactly
there's
it.
a lot of ambiguity, and there's so much cover your butt with the legal system. And I like your laws. If you can help, yeah, don't rear naked choke a kid, but if you can help break up a fight, break up the fight if you want to do that. Nobody should be required to, but if you can, help out, break up the fight. And the other thing you said that was very interesting to me is the training is good. You get your certificate, and now what? Now what? Like, you got your certificate, and now 4 months later you have to do the three moves that you learned. How are you going to? You need to train. This is the same thing with police and people who are taught in combat. You have to do a continual training. Like, your stuff. You know to get an underhook. You know to get an overhook. You know not to put force on the neck, not to put force on the joints. You know all that, and you do jujitsu, and you look like a pretty strong guy. So that's somebody you can call. But somebody who's not, has no physical athleticism and takes the training once, you're going to wait for that person? But that doesn't make sense to me.
Right. And I have to say, in those, and luckily too, where I teach, it's not too often. At the beginning of my career, when I was in a different state, it was rather often. And I have to say, teachers are, I don't think society understands sometimes how incredible teachers really are as people, that they're not just passionate about math or science. They're, they're willing to put their physical well-being at risk for the betterment of a child. And that is something that I think that is incredibly special. In my 21-year career, I have never seen a teacher not try to stop a violent altercation from happening. I've never seen someone to stand there and say, well, what am I going to do? Never seen it.
Because
Uh,
it's not in your nature, right? It's not
no.
in somebody's nature to watch somebody get beat up and bloodied when somebody could just step in and break it up.
And even just standing there, like this verbally saying something, or even just like grabbing a book bag that you can, or yelling to a teacher, hey, call someone, doing something. I've seen these teachers in my career just react outstandingly in these situations. And, they're special people. They really are, because not too many people would do that. I live in Nutley, right next to New York City. You know how many times people just like step over people walking through New York and just won't stop to help? Teachers won't do that. They won't, because we care too much about society, and we care too much about these kids. Like I said before, we care about them more than ourselves at times.
Right, right. Well, you definitely seem to get it. So just to switch gears, and Jason, I'm sorry, I'm hogging this up because I'm a teacher and we're in the same industry. I'll let you ask some questions, Jason. I don't mean to take all the time here.
I'm just doing what our listeners are doing right now, just taking it all in, Frank.
Take, okay.
There's so many things I would like to say. Um, I really don't know which path I want to take with this, but I'll start with this. This is a conversation that every parent, every student, every teacher, every leader, every business person out there can get from this conversation, that it's so important to have that rapport. I love that you talked about having the advantage of having a rapport with your students and being able to connect with them. Working immediately in a situation from a level of mutual respect gives you so much of an advantage in any circumstance. And I know in our pre-interview, Mike, you talked about strategizing. So can you tell our listeners a little bit about your perspective on, kind of what jujitsu maybe has helped you with in your job in terms of strategizing, and, how important it is to have that level of mutual respect so that you can start from that good place, where the student knows that you care about them, you're connected to them, and you can now have that conversation to help the situation, and the strategizing that it allows you to do.
So the strategizing is so important because every child is different, and they all have different needs. They all come from different walks of life and different homes. So strategy A is not going to necessarily work for every single student. So you have to have a toolbox to use, just like in jujitsu. If you only have one move or one guard pass that you do, you might not get too far. And when you go into a role, you need to know, okay, I'm going to do A. If A doesn't work, I'm going to do B. B doesn't work, I'm going to do C. And you start connecting those dots. And the individuals in jujitsu who can connect those A, B, C, D dots quick, those are the ones who advance, right? That's how your jujitsu IQ, if you will, growing. And as a blue belt, I'll say I'm more of a B, the occasional C guy, right? But when you get into a situation with students, you have to know, okay, I know the student, I know the situation. This is how I'm going to approach it. You immediately have to know, okay, this isn't working. I'm going to go to option B. I'm going to go to option C. So you already, before you enter into that situation, you have to have the strategy, multiple strategies rather. And what's important is you want to have the end goal will always remain the same, right? So think hypothetically, I'm in a meeting with a student and a parent, and the parent is not really in agreement with the discipline that I put forth on their student. Okay, this happens. And parents need to be heard. And these meetings, believe it or not, sometimes even if they're contentious, I do enjoy them because I look at that as an opportunity for me to form a relationship with the parent that I don't have yet. So you need to go into that situation open minded, number one. And number two, knowing that the end goal of this meeting is that myself and the parent and the student are going to have a mutual understanding of each other. We might not necessarily agree, but we're going to have a mutual understanding and a relationship is going to be formed. How we get there, that's a whole other story. And that's where having that toolbox of strategies is super important. And, the jujitsu connection might be, for example, like for me, when I train the move of the day that we have, and every sparring role that I have, I don't do anything else until I try that move specifically, right? So when I go, and for me, what that does is it gives me a game plan. It says, okay, you're going to do X, Y, and Z to get this. And then if it doesn't work, I've learned, right? I can go back and revisit it. And then now the next role that I have, I can fine tune that and maybe actually execute that move. So every meeting that I have with a parent, with a student, colleagues, even sometimes we don't necessarily agree, but it's important to have that strategy to say, okay, here's our end goal. Here's where we want to be. And then have that ability to take multiple roads to get there if need be.
Like kind of looking at the big picture, right?
Exactly.
Like there's many paths that lead to a guillotine. Many different
Yes.
ways to get one. Yes.
Yes.
I like that strategy. Very fluid. You have to be the water, right?
Absolutely. Like we recently at our gym, the Kimura is like the move. If you train at Momentum, you will know your Kimura is inside out and upside down. And and I love using it, but you can hit that Kimura from so many different places. And the more that you train and the more that you learn, what I'm fascinated with the sport of jiu-jitsu is once you think, oh, okay, that's how you do the move. And then a year later, it's like, that was there that entire time? No, I didn't know you can hit a Kimura from a north-south position. Literally just learned that this year. And it's great, And
Hey, you
from
got to
the
you got to send me that video. I'm all about north south. Send me that video.
Yeah, the Kimura from north-south it's a slick move. I really, really enjoy it. I've had some success with it in some sparring sessions. And I've been hit with it a lot, to be very honest. But that's the fascinating about the sport, right? It's always constantly evolving, constantly changing. And when you are working with students and you're working with really when you're an educator, you're working with a community. Communities are constantly evolving. The problems and the challenges that I have now and that I'm sorry, I'm going to use the plural, we as educators are facing today, we didn't see 5 years ago. We didn't see 10 years ago. So as society evolves, we have to evolve with it and we have to adjust our strategies. And I just had this conversation with my principal the other day. I said, this has been a really good school year, but I said, here are some things that we definitely need to work on that are definitely new because we have to, the old rule book might not necessarily be applicable to the new student. And so we got to kind of rewrite the game plan, if you will, and evolve with that. And so I'm looking forward to the summer actually and working with him and making some really great changes that are going to be very beneficial to our students.
Awesome. Do you get a summer vacation? Do they give you some time in the summer?
I do get some days. I got to say, in my district, we are treated very nicely as administrators. We definitely have those days to use. And they're important to use. Every once in a while, you need that mental break, if you will,
100%.
to just relax, regroup, re-strategize. The summertime for us is so important because we go till June 24th is when we graduate. So we really have just July and August.
Wow.
Yeah, we go late.
You go
We go late.
late. Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. Us, New Jersey, New York even goes later. New York usually goes till around like June 30th in some areas.
Oh my gosh. I
Yeah.
should be
Yeah.
praising the gods. Our last day is the 16th.
Oh, that's nice.
And we had
That's nice.
five snow days too. So it's not bad. Yeah. So you will not find me complaining. You will not find me complaining.
Yeah, and with the time that we have off, it's definitely really good. And again, with the career of being an educator, a lot of people that aren't in it from the outside think, oh, you get the summers off, you're just hanging out. No, not at all. What we're doing is we're regrouping, re-strategizing, planning, and we use those 2 months very wisely to build schedules, to revisit policy, to look at new rules, to hire new teachers, to train new staff. And then the teachers themselves, you know, they're not just sitting by the pool all summer. So many teachers that either in grad school, they're participating in our summer school activities that we have. We have a lot of things going on at the school constantly that they're working on. If they're coaches, they're doing camps and clinics on the side themselves. We don't stop. We do take times to, of course, regroup, but we're constantly moving, all of us.
Wow.
It's awesome.
That is awesome.
Wow. Frank, I just got one more before we get takeaways. I know we're getting close to the end of our show tonight,
Yep.
but
Yep.
I just want to get this one more in there. You talked about Mike, Frank talked about this too, that in education, you have policies in schools and even, and you mentioned about law enforcement, Mike, how we train there's certain programs out there that train law enforcement in concepts and principles of jujitsu to manage a situation. And I think there's this obstacle that I want to just throw out there as an advocate for jujitsu in schools. Frank mentioned episode that we had with a person who he has a nonprofit organization and he teaches jujitsu in schools. So we had a few people comment on the podcast saying, jujitsu will never be in schools. They will never allow it. You can't be teaching kids to choke each other, blah, 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 blah. And, I have an instructor, my first karate teacher told me something so important and it stuck with me in my head for a long time. He said, that it's not what you train, it's not the martial art that you train that matters the most. It's how you train that matters the most. So
Sure.
my advocation for jujitsu in schools is that it's not that jujitsu is teaching things that are going to be teaching violence to, staff or students. If you teach it the right way. So if you know how you're teaching it and you are on top of it and understand the purpose of what you're doing and you do it the right way, it can have a lot of benefits to any school district. So I just wanted to throw that out there as an advocate for jujitsu in schools.
Yeah, let's go.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely. The jujitsu should be in every school, and I will stand by that.
I love that because, jujitsu from the outside, people that aren't part of the art or the sport do see it as something violent, right? Like, oh, you're teaching kids or people how to fight. And that's not what it is. You meet people that train in jujitsu, they're the nicest, kindest people that you're probably going to meet. And what jujitsu, first of all, it's an art, right? It is legitimately an art. And it also is incredibly intellectual because you're doing, in my personal opinion, when you strategize and you're training in jiu-jitsu and you're practicing it, it's a chess match. And then I know we've all probably heard this, analogy a lot, but it really is. You have to, it really trains your mind to react in a way. If I do this and they do that, if I do that, they do this. And when you develop those skills to problem solve on the fly in high pressure situations, that is a great characteristic to have as a person. And that's what that art of jujitsu gives you. It's not just the ability to fight. It gives you so much more than that. It gives you what I just mentioned, the intellectual development. It gives you the confidence that you need to be successful in life. It trains you to how to handle pressure, not only physically, but mentally. Because when you're on that mat and you are dead tired, don't think you have anything left in the tank. And that 20-something-year-old purple belt competitor walks up and goes, "Hey, do you got one more roll left in you?" And it's like, all right, let's do this. You surprise yourself. You don't realize it might be a survival round. And for me, it's a survival round, but you did it and you persevered there and you overcame with it and you learned something about yourself. You learned that what you thought was your ceiling wasn't. You learned that you can actually push yourself harder than you ever thought you could before. And what other better lessons to give a child than that?
Man, that was just well said. That is,
And
I mean,
that's coming from a vice principal. He knows best when it comes to what's needed in schools too, right?
coming from a
So
vice principal and seconded by a teacher. Check that out, parents. This is one that we have to flag for parents. I think parents need to hear this whole conversation.
That
So
would be great.
let's
100%.
let's make sure we get this out. I'm gonna make sure I get this out in my school system too. So, Jason, do I need to tell you what time it is?
Well, Frank, what time is it?
It's tap out time, your favorite time of the program where we wrap up nice and neatly into little presents some of the golden nuggets of wisdom that we have accumulated from Mike today. So, without further ado, let's get started. Mike, you have given us just a lot of great stuff to think about. And if I was a parent, well, I am a parent, but if I had younger kids, I would definitely want to be tuned in on this episode. So, just starting up from the beginning, you said a couple of things about jujitsu. First of all, shout out to the UFC because almost every single person who's in jujitsu said, "Well, I was watching the UFC and I thought the grappling was cool." UFC has really supported jujitsu, so thank you to the UFC for that. Maybe they could sponsor us, right, Jason? That'd be cool. You also said what a lot of people say when they come on the show, how humbling it was when you started jujitsu, and that seeing what people do, it just motivated you to want to do it more. So that's great. You talked about and gave a great example of how jujitsu, you use the word is home, your community. You have partners there that you train with who are looking to help you and lift you up. It's really that simple. And it's all based on the pillars of trust. That is what jujitsu does. And then you gave us a clear example of a former student coming in and you were rolling with him and then you helped him get his substitute certification and then you helped him get a job at your school. People, listeners, this happens all the time in jujitsu. People are helping people all the time. There's a lot of intelligent practitioners. There's a lot of people who are very successful. Highly successful people tend to like jujitsu and they will help you become highly successful too, just like you did, Mike, for your former student. Something you said just going to pull it right out of context, but I loved it, is there is no when. There's no when. You don't join jiu-jitsu when. You don't join the gym when. You don't start learning German when. You do it now. You're ready. You're ready now. Because
Mhm.
learning the German is how you learn German. Doing the jiu-jitsu is how you learn jiu-jitsu. So shout out to Nike. Maybe they'll want to sponsor us too. Just do it, right? Just do it. We talked about our two favorite phrases, and to parents, I've used this for my kids, who I think turned out really well. Very proud of my children, and I use this for my students. If you're a parent, sometimes, yeah, sometimes you have to be an authoritarian. I'm not saying not to, but many times, if you just say, "I'm a little disappointed in you making that decision," that just shifts the whole conversation. Or, "I just think you're better than that decision you made. Let's talk about that." You're actually giving them a compliment. Those two phrases right there is worth its weight in gold. So please commit that to memory if you're a parent or a teacher or an educational leader. Those are great, great phrases. You talked about your strategy of dealing with kids, and I noticed the theme kept coming up that you ask your kids, your students, questions. And I can tell you the old school way of talking at a student versus asking them questions. Questions empowers them, they open up, and they show you care, which is what you said, Mike, is the most important thing that a kid knows. Once they know you care, they're not fighting you anymore.
Mhm.
They understand you're on the side. Some of the other things. Oh, you mentioned the growth, that growth comes from discomfort. You said growth comes from pain. You said growth comes from struggle. Forging steel comes from melting it and twisting it and doing all those things. Those were great analogies of. I'm going to shout out to Mike Triana, a Muay Thai, absolute Muay Thai savage. He trained at Team Link for a while. He said, and this is one of the best quotes. He said, "You have to visit sacrifice and pain every day on your terms. Otherwise, they'll come visit you on theirs."
I like that.
That
I like that.
powerful, right? Powerful.
Very, very.
I loved that you said, and for anybody in education and for parents, there's somebody for everyone. So if you're a parent, you're having a hard time connecting with your kid, well, maybe you have a brother or sister, an aunt or uncle, maybe there's a teacher. There's always everybody can connect to somebody. And the most important thing, if you're a parent and you have a kid, you find that person. You help your child find that person. And if you sometimes it's you and sometimes it's not you, and that's okay. I love that you said you gave me so much I can go on for hours. I love that you said you have to know when to tap. Jiu-jitsu teaches you that, and in real life, know when to tap, know when to look for somebody else to help you, know when to reset. It's not like you're trying to bench press 225 every time, right?
Mhm.
You got to know when to tap. I love that you supported girls in wrestling. Girl power. I'm all about it. Girls in wrestling, girls in jujitsu. Traditionally, they kind of haven't had the support and access to that. I think today they do. And it's just
Oh, yeah.
great to hear that at your school you had those two girls who won awards and went to states, and I think that's a wonderful, wonderful thing. Thanks for shouting that out. And to wrap it up, by the way, you got to send me a video on the Kimura from North South because I love North South.
Absolutely.
Send me that video. I want to see it. I want to know how to do it, and I want to maul my opponents on the mat with that.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And you talked about being adaptable, flowing like the water. I loved that you said that you're excited this summer to be adaptable and come up with new and better ways to do what you do. That makes you high level. I can tell that you're a BJJ practitioner. You're thinking just like one, and now you're employing that thought process onto education. And finally, the last thing that I really took was Jiu-Jitsu allows you to solve problems under high pressure. We had a guest who said it so beautifully, so I'm going to share that with you. He said Jiu-Jitsu teaches you grace under fire.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that encapsulates it. So, Mike, I don't know if the end of this video is going to have to be redone by us, but I want to tell you thank you so much. Your school system is damn lucky to have you with your philosophy, your attitude, the way you look at kids, the way that you obviously are in it for the right reasons. You're a confident guy. You're physically fit. You're a good presence to have in the school. I'm sure a lot of kids look up to you. So thank you for showing us what a great leader in education can be. And thank you for sharing all of your insights into how we can be better teachers, better parents, better BJJ practitioners. We really appreciate you.
Thank you so much for the kind words. That's I don't know what to say. Thank you so much. And this was such a great opportunity to have this conversation. And thank you for giving me the chance to be able to talk to you guys. This has been a phenomenal conversation. I love what you're doing, by the way, with this podcast. I think it's incredible. Um, and thank you so much. I'll be telling everybody about this. And the ones that I've listened to before, I'm trying to get through them all. They're phenomenal. I think it's really cool what you guys are doing. And just thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Completely our pleasure, and a lot of people are going to benefit from your wisdom. That's what you just gave a gift. So I'm sure our listeners would send a big thank you as well.
Thank you.
All right. Listen, you have a great weekend. Enjoy yourself. Hope you get a little rest. Leave your job where your job is. Relax, enjoy, and make sure you stay in touch with us.
Absolutely, guys. Thank you so much.
All
Thanks,
right. You
Mike.
take care.
All right, bye, guys. Bye-bye.